you should have the how to brush glaze paper in front of you. Again, make sure you have your name, period, date, and table color. And so our objective today is to learn how to brush glaze using low fire or cone 06 glazes. So some rules to remember before you begin. So we went through the golden rules of ceramics last time. Remember, you are not to glaze the bottom of a piece. If you glaze the bottom of a piece, it will stick to the kiln shelf, and I have to use a hammer and a chisel to get your piece off the kiln. So never glaze the bottom. Do not cross-contaminate glazes. Glazes are not like paints. So with paints, if you want to make orange, you would mix two paint colors, and you'd mix red and yellow. But with glazes, it doesn't work like that because glazes have a certain chemical compound that in the heat allow them to turn the color they need to turn. And you're going to find, like when we dip glaze our mugs, that some of the glazes start off one color and they're going to end up another. A good example is our blue dip glaze. It starts off pink, and once it's fired, it turns navy blue. And that's okay because it's not like paint. And you want to make sure to use the correct cone of glaze. So go ahead and turn your paper over, and I want to explain to you what we mean by cones. So it's most important that you differentiate between cone 05 and 06 and cone 5 and cone 6. Just between the two of them, what do you notice is the difference already? There's a 0. That's the big indicator. So if we look here and we look here, we can see that these are higher fire temperatures than this. So look at this little thermometer that I've got here for you. With our thermometer, cone 06 is a low fire temperature. The further we go up the thermometer, what do you notice about the numbers? They go down, right? Like it's kind of counterintuitive. Instead of going 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 all the way up, we're actually going 06, 05, 04, 03, 02, 01. 01, is that a warmer temperature than 06 or cooler? Warmer, right? So we use this 06 for low fire. This is great to prevent projects from bleeding. So when you paint your designs onto your bowls and I fire them, they're not going to move. What you paint will stay where you put it. With high fire, we get a lot more melting, which is great. With high fire, your piece is much more durable. So we're going to high fire your mugs because you're going to use those all the time. You're going to want to put them in the dishwasher. So your glaze on that is going to melt. So if you look up here, cone 6 is a much hotter temperature. So the most important thing, as I said, is to differentiate between the cones. Now we call it a cone, and the word cone is often replaced with the symbol triangle because in the past, before we had electronic kilns, we had to place cones in the kiln itself, and once the temperature of the cone hit the correct temperature, the cone would melt over and turn off a little off switch. And it would hit a little off switch, and that's why we call it cones. So you can see here we've got our cones, and once they're fired, they melt down here. Any questions on that? Okay, so the thing I want to make you aware of, though, is it's really important you get the correct firing because two things will happen. If you apply a high fire glaze and it does not reach temperature, it will not melt fully, and it will not look shiny and glossy. So it'll not actually melt. But then if you apply a low fire glaze, and it's fired too hot, it could melt off your pot and onto the kiln shelf. that's why it's really important that you get the correct firing for each piece. So for our blind heads, we're going to be using cone 06. What are we going to be using for those? Cone 06. Okay, awesome. So cone 06 glazes are located over here against. So step number 1, on your piece, if you need to sand any rough spots, you're going to check out a sanding tool from Mrs. Mallory. And you sand outside because of silica. Don't use sandpaper because it gets torn up. Your ceramic piece, once it's fired, will be stronger than the sandpaper. So you check out one of these little blocks from me. And you might find that there are little rough spots, especially if you had boogers left where you carved. That's where you can just take one of these and you sand over it, and you're going to sand over it outside. Most of you should not need to be sanding much because you should, before it's even fired, try to ensure things are smooth. All right. Step number 2, use a damp sponge to wipe off your piece before you glaze. That's why we use these small sponges. They're located at the back behind the sinks. And you just take your damp sponge and you're going to wipe your piece off. Why do you think we do this? Yeah, there's going to be dust on it or even oil from your fingers. All of that can prevent the glaze from adhering properly. So this is the bottom of my piece, so no glaze is going to go on there. But once I have wiped it off, and once your pot is no longer damp, I want you to mark with a pencil to indicate the bottom. This might seem really simple, but it helps you as a student just know that you should not glaze there. Mark along the bottom, a 1/4 inch around the side, and I just put pencil marks where I'm not to glaze. The pencil marks will burn off in the kiln, so you'll never see them again. That's why we leave a 1/4 inch up the side, because if there is any bleeding, it won't be enough to cause it to actually stick to the kiln. So you're going to select your glazes from cart and ensure that the lid is on them, because you need to shake them up. Glazes are a mixture of little tiny particles of glass suspended in water. So they separate. So always make sure the lid is on. Otherwise, could you imagine if I started shaking this and the lid wasn't on? It'd go everywhere. So I make sure the lid is on, and I'm going to shake it up. If the glaze is empty or dry, I want you to bring it to me so I can place an order for a new one. I need your help making sure we have enough glazes. So if it's empty or dry, just bring it up to me. Okay, once the glaze is mixed up, use a glaze-specific brush. That's one, and you'll notice I kind of sprayed all our glaze brushes with red spray paint to help you out. If you ever find a brush over in the slip that has red spray paint, what do you think I want you to do? Yeah, just put it back for me. You can even let me know. I'd be happy to give you a score card because I appreciate the help. Again, if you ever find a brush in there that doesn't have spray paint, by the slip brushes. Okay, so this is really important. To glaze your pot, use the right size brush. It's crazy. I will see students trying to glaze a huge pot with a tiny little brush, and they're just like painting for hours. So make sure if you're going to use a large area for a large brush and a small area for a small brush. You always want to apply 4 coats minimum. And remember on your grading how your glazing has to look good. The key for that, to make it look good, means even coats, enough glaze, and there's no white raw clay showing where there shouldn't be. The only place that should have raw clay showing is what? The bottom. Perfect. Okay. So you want to apply your coats in different directions. Now, for your blind heads, I want you to use a minimum of 4 colors. So let's skip down here real quick to the requirements. Use 4 different colors. I want you to paint 3 extra details. What do you think I mean by that? What do you think I mean by that? Yeah. Bingo. Exactly. It could be spots, it could be dots, it could be stripes, it could be whatever. These can be as creative as you want. It could be freckles. Your eyes might have fallen off in the kiln because remember we didn't slip and score anything. You might paint your eyes as one of the details. You might paint your hair as one of the details. Okay? So I want you to paint 3 extra details that might not already be on your face. I want you to ensure that you wipe off the bottom. I want you to glaze neatly with excellent craftsmanship. And then, of course, you'll get a fire ticket from me, and we'll get it checked off. All right, so I'm ready to glaze this guy. So I'm going to select my color, and I can just place my brush in the glaze container, and I find what you want to do is kind of wipe off any excess from your brush because you'll find that it sort of bleeds onto your piece. And carefully use the brush to paint and what I call trim areas. So if I want to make this nice and neat, I might use the side of my brush and I'm carefully trimming around where I'm adding my glaze. If, by accident, you get some glaze on somewhere where you don't want it, if you look, I've now got it on the pupil, all you need to do is take a damp brush and wipe it off. It might have stained your piece slightly. That's okay. As long as you get the excess off, you'll be able to glaze over that without seeing any of the original color underneath. So you might find for some areas, like the large areas, I'm going to use a large brush. And I'm going to paint horizontally at first. And I want to let it dry. Then I'll do another coat and paint vertically. Why do you think I recommend painting in 2 different directions? So it's not streaky, so we can make sure it's totally covered. Absolutely. Especially when you're painting with like white glaze and it's hard to tell where you've glazed already. You just want to make sure that you've really covered everything. Notice how I'm using a smaller brush when I'm going into delicate areas. I really want you to learn how to control your glaze and your brushes. That's why I'm giving you 2 days to glaze these guys. Glazes can be layered, meaning I could put yellow or white on top of this if I wanted to, but you have to paint all your coats of one color before you do any layering. Notice how I use the brush to kind of get into any cracks and crevices, and I'm really rotating my piece to make sure that I'm getting around everything. Now, could I, if I want to add yellow to my eyes, once I shake this up, can I just put my brush straight into here? Why not? It's going to be contaminated and we can't guarantee what color this will become. So always wash your brushes in between. And I recommend just with a little bit of paper towel wiping off the excess water. So now I can put this in here. Now you, of course, would do all the blue before you moved on to something else, right? But for time's sake, it's not necessary for you to watch me do the whole thing. And you, of course, would do how many coats before you move on to something else? 4 minimum. Now I'm going to paint this on. Oh, and I bled over there, so I can just kind of wipe that off. Let me show you something too. Once I paint this eye, I want to show you another little trick. Notice how I kind of stab my brush in. And these will be graded as a practice on those requirements that I talked to you about. I do like to let things dry before I add another coat. Otherwise, I find I'm not really adding good coats. I'm almost wiping off what I'm adding. So I might move on to something else, but let me show you. If I get yellow onto here and I didn't actually want it, if I try to wipe it off with water, it's going to wipe all the glaze off, right? So I found the best thing to do, you know those little knives in your toolkit? Once it's dry, just kind of scrape the excess off, just that first layer, down to the color you want it to be, and go back over it a couple times. So let's say I did want to add some freckles to this guy. Let's say I wanted to add some dark blue freckles. Sometimes I like to use from the lid when I'm doing details. I can just paint my freckles on top, and I'm just going to let them dry, and I keep adding 4 coats. So again, I'd let it dry, add another one, and another one, and with the low fire, these freckles won't shift at all. If I fire this high fire, I'd get this kind of streak down my face. Freckles would be 1 detail. This I would not count as 3. If you are going to add stripes and things, try to be really nice and accurate with your stripes. So I like to steady my hand on my piece as I pull the brush. You'll find if your brush does not have enough glaze in it, it gets kind of scratchy. So just load up the brush again, place it down, and kind of pull it to trim it nice and neat.